Have you ever cried on an airplane? I haven't, but apparently it's a thing. This is the Focus Group.
It's the savvy side of 9 to 5. Listen.
Bueller, Bueller, Bueller.
Laugh. And learn.
Negotiation. This is what you do in business.
This is the Focus Group with Tim Bennett.
Staunch.
And John Nash.
Keep your clothes looking neat and clean.
We're all business. Except when we're not.
Oh, time is marching on. It's February 27th. Welcome to the Focus Group. Tim Bennett here, as always, with my good friend and co-host, John Nash. Hi, John. Look at you sitting. It's almost March. Can you believe it?
It's almost March, yeah.
So I pulled out this little ditty today. I don't know if you can see it here.
Yeah.
We're watching on our video, which thank you for tuning in live at 1 p.m. East through our Facebook feed or our YouTube stream. I got a pink and blue on today. I don't know if you can notice it on
Yeah, I see it.
front of the mic. I almost feel like one of the Russian military because they wear the...
Or a prisoner. I mean,
Well, I didn't think of that.
The stripes, all you need is a little ball with the chain around your ankle.
Or a prisoner.
I don't know why I came up with that one, but there you go.
My goodness. So how you been, John? Did you get any riding in with this weather or what?
I had one
semi-warm.
Okay, so the thing about the winter, this year I'm very excited because I spent money on something called a Wahoo kicker. It's a funny name for an indoor training device. The back wheel of the bike comes off. There's a gear cluster on this thing. The whole bike mounts to it. You plug it in. It's got a flywheel mechanism of some sort, but it creates a resistance so it feels like you're riding on the road. And so this year I do that, and I have my computer monitor in front of me, and I use something called Zwift, which is kind of like this, it's like a video game. So you could do races, you could do group rides, the whole bit, and it's made the winter much easier to deal with because I don't have to take the bike out.
So it's better than those other rollers that were just like zzz, zzz, zzz.
The rollers are great, but they only can get you to a certain level of resistance. So to answer the question, yeah, I have been outside, but every time I take the bike out, even if it's sunny, like the other day I was riding along and I see this snow melt thing. It was like a half mile of going through water. Of course, by the time you get home, the bike is
a mess.
So you got to clean it off, clean the drivetrain. I mean, if you want to be good about it, you got to rinse it off, clean the drivetrain. So I would just rather wait for a little bit better weather to come along and do that with. But yeah, it's this time of year where I'm like, wow, the winter's actually going to end soon.
Well, I try to count it down, but we do get snow in March anymore because of climate change. We seem to get an awful lot of storms in March and April. I prefer them in November, December, but we seem to get them in March and April.
Hello, let's call weather. Hello, weather gods. Tim would prefer November 15th to January 10th.
Well, I was listening to these. Of course, we'll be dead, so I don't care. But I was listening to these people on talk radio about how in 2050. So I was trying to figure. I guess it'd be 90, maybe. I don't know. 2050, it'd be 87.
Possibly, yeah.
I don't care if it's hot. They said that though there's going to be cities, particularly in Asia and the Middle East, where it's going to be so warm you can't go outside.
Correct. Yeah.
But isn't that Arizona?
Or Florida in August or July. You've been down to Miami, those areas. You walk out, it's like a wall of heat that hits you in the face. It's just crazy.
What was it? Sam Kinison. He had it right years ago in the 80s.
Sam
right.
Kinison?
We have deserts too. We don't live in them. Remember, there's deserts. You don't live in them.
Did he had an untimely passing?
Yeah, he
right?
did, unfortunately.
But do you think if Sam Kinison would be alive today, he couldn't do the comedy he did?
Well, it's similar to Lisa Lampanelli, right? She's changed. She stopped her shtick. I mean, she was equal offender to everybody, particularly a lot of racial stereotypes. But she stopped doing it. She said she didn't feel good about it anymore. Not that she'd ever feel good about it, but there was a certain amount of humor with stereotypes, right?
Well, let's check in with our boys in the booth.
Boys in the
we
booth?
got Garrett on audio, and we have John on video. Guys,
How you guys doing?
What's up?
Our team that brings us to the world every week.
Yeah, the world.
Hey, hey. Okay, so that's John. That's
We're all lit
Garrett.
up.
Wow, guy, do you like your new cams? This is cool.
Yeah, we got some new shots. Boom.
Look at you with the new hairdo there.
Guys, I think you look good. So, do you think Sam Kinison could ever do what he did in the past today?
No way. Impossible.
I mean, he could, but he just wouldn't be as big.
Yeah.
Good.
I used to love when he picked. I used to love when he picked on who's the one? Sinead O'Connor. He did a parody of her, which you can't find online. His estate's been pretty good about not allowing any of his stuff on YouTube or anything. I can't find any of it, but there's one where he did, I think it's Mandinka or whatever song she did, and she was in that, she's dancing around in that kind of
swan thing,
caftan.
Yeah.
And he does a parody of it, which was hilarious. I mean, Howard Stern used to talk about it all the time, but I can't find it online anywhere. And I've looked for it because it was a funny.
You just said something that triggered a thought. So I was going through and getting rid of some DVDs that I've watched a couple times, and I'm donating them to a library or
those coasters.
Yeah, well, they still have use, but there was one that I had. It was like one of those earlier releases of the Best of the Tonight Show or something. And I popped it in because I usually do that to make sure the disc is okay, especially if I'm giving it to like a library or to Bob's mother where she lives, the facility. They maintain a library of DVDs. And I started watching, and I realized that there will be a point, and I think we actually may be closing in on it, where Johnny Carson is just not going to be a relevant name or entity to a whole bunch of people.
Yeah, it's like saying Milton Berle to us a little bit. I mean, we knew who he was.
Groucho Marx. I mean,
we knew who old starlets were, which a lot of people don't. Right? We knew who Betty Davis was. We knew who Joan Crawford, and they were from the 40s, right? But we were just smart about it. You'll laugh because I was watching. So on one of the, I think it's Antenna TV or something, they play the Johnny Carson shows at the exact date that they happened back in either 72 or so. If it's February 27th, they'll play February 27th, 1972. So I'm watching the show, and you couldn't believe the guests. And I thought, had either of these two people had known about what their life would make of themselves. So the first guest was Jerry Seinfeld.
How young was he? Did he do stand? He
did a stand-up routine. Okay. It was 80, might have been 86 or 88. It was okay. But I thought, so little did he know what would become of him in 10 years, right?
I could see Johnny. I want to welcome a new young comic.
Oh, and he goes, oh, that's good stuff. That's funny stuff. And his next guest, the first time she was on with Johnny Carson, she was so excited. She couldn't believe her fortune, how exciting this was. You want to take a guess?
I want to guess Joan Rivers?
No, a talk show person.
A talk show person.
And she was delighted.
Oprah Winfrey?
Oprah Winfrey.
Oh, my God, really?
It was Oprah Winfrey and Jerry Seinfeld, and I thought two of probably the most powerful or wealthiest people in the last. Yeah. I mean, Oprah's success and Jerry Seinfeld's success was just unbelievable, and I thought between Johnny Carson and him there with Oprah and Seinfeld, can you imagine? Now you look back on it, you're like, oh, my gosh.
Yeah, but back then they were new. They were new.
So. Anyway, that was my trip. There she is there. If you're watching on our video feed.
Thanks for finding that.
Garrett and John had found a picture of it. Yeah, that was Oprah. She came out. She was so excited. She's like, oh, my God, I can't believe I'm finally on the Carson show. And it was a great interview. And she was as good as ever. I mean, she's such a natural in front of the camera.
Media.
So what caught your eye this week, Mr. Nash?
What caught your eye? Here's what Tim and John found.
A little bit of LGBT history by way of an older septuagenarian grandparent couple who owned, which is closed now. It closed about a week ago. A bookstore in Santa Monica, in West Hollywood, Santa Monica area, called the Circus of Books.
Circus of Books.
Circus of Books, and it was owned by Barry and Karen Mason. For 37 years, they've run the shop. It's a bookstore that sold gay and straight nudie magazines. That's how they put it in. Nudie. Hardcore pornographic films and sex toys, as well as international newspapers and classic literary titles. So I suppose by a copy of Playgirl magazine, you could pick up, Wuthering Heights as an example of a classic literary tale.
I love that side. Caution, best prices in town.
and so on the video, we're showing a picture of Barry Mason at the counter of his store. And I also love the fact that on the store counter, there was a tray of Bic lighters. The stores like that used to sell things.
Looks like Larry David.
Yeah, he looks like Larry David, yeah. And then there's some book with some hunky guy.
Leather women. Look at leather women.
Leather women. And so the Santa Monica Boulevard, that's where I got it wrong. It's in West Hollywood, but it's on Santa Monica Boulevard store, gained legendary status in Southern California's LGBTQ community as a place where people could peruse gay erotica or meet other gay people, hanging out in a place free from homophobia. Over the years, Circus of Books has survived an FBI raid, federal obscenity charges, and complaints from law enforcement who said the store attracted prostitution and other criminal elements. It remained open during the AIDS crisis when numerous employees had passed away. But but it could not survive. Guess what it couldn't survive?
The internet?
By and large, but one particular.
Oh, I don't
Amazon.
Oh. It's sad. It's kind of what Amazon. It's similar to what Home Depot and Walmart's did to the small stores.
Totally,
in town, right?
Eviscerates the small businesses. So a lot of people are sorry to see them go, and in many cases, customers like this store saved my life, because we've talked on the show a lot about how the LGBT community used to socialize and where we would go to find things in the past, and this is a perfect example of that. When the Masons started out in the early 80s, Circus of Books and the gay bars were places where people would go to meet. So there you go. So it started out with the owner, Barry, used to sell medical devices for patients who were on dialysis, but he used to have to carry a malpractice policy. It got so expensive that he stopped doing it. His wife one day sees an ad in the newspaper published by Larry Flint, and they were looking for magazine distributors. So she said, honey, why don't you do this hustler and chic thing? So he started driving around to liquor. Now, this is where we used to have to buy magazines, right? He'd started driving around to liquor stores and newsstands taking orders. Karen did the deliveries. She was pregnant at the time, but she always hired unemployed musicians to help her with the magazine deliveries. She preferred drummers, who always seemed to be the most reliable. One West Hollywood store, Book Circus, ordered 600 gay titles, including Blue Boy and Huncho each month, and instantly sold out. I'd have to fill the whole truck up with just those titles, she said. Customers were so glad when the magazines arrived, they would come out front and help unload it. You could never find this stuff anyway.
They go on by, John.
So, the article went on to talk about how in the past, if you wanted to buy this material, you had to go to it was behind a curtain.
Yeah.
You were embarrassed. You would bury it in another publication. The guy at the counter would see you were buying the New York Times, and maybe you're getting Honcho or Freshman or something like that.
How'd that fall in the bag?
Their daughter, Rachel, is actually making a documentary about the two of them. It was an accidental career. They never thought they'd do this for 37 years. And the one touching thing I found was that during the AIDS crisis, the daughter, Rachel, who was a child at the time, said she used to love all the employees. They were always very courteous, nice guys, good people. And she said they would vanish. Well, they were dying. Oh. And when the Masons ended up owning the entire building the bookstore was in, they rented out the apartments upstairs to whoever, needed an apartment. And they would always be careful to make sure they were helping someone with HIV/AIDS. And they would insist that if someone was feeling okay, they come into work, maintain a regular schedule. So they were just really, really good people.
What a great story.
She said at one point towards the end of the article, the Masons by that time had bought the building, which had several apartments. Many of the tenants were estranged from their families. And she says, or he said, a lot of parents wouldn't come to get their things or come to their funerals when the young guys passed away. And Karen says, and sometimes I would get a call from a mother, and the mother would say, tell me about my son. And Karen says in the article, she goes, where were you, lady? I had nothing to say to parents like that. She literally would say, I have nothing to say to you, and click. Which was an interesting point, right? Where were you? So Karen herself is a bit embarrassed when talking about pornography. They've never looked at any of the titles. They didn't pop them into any of the machines. She still has the Rolodex of where she used to make all her magazine calls. And the very end of the article, it says, she has 2 sketches above her desk done by her children. One is a picture of Mother Teresa, and the other is a drawing of a frail man with an oxygen tube in his nose. And she said, they're a reminder to me that everything in life is finite. So, Circus Books. What was it?
Well, it's sad that, so it's closing, but
Circus of Books.
I would love to see the documentary when it comes out.
I believe it will be hitting the film circuit, the short film circuit, literally this month or next month. And I would love to pursue this because what a cool couple.
Yeah, and it's sad that it closed, but unfortunately that's happened.
Tim, we've probably walked right by it.
A million times.
Whenever we've been in LA, we've probably been in this area and we've probably seen it.
Circus of Books.
So that's what caught my eye.
Mine was very different, I guess. Maybe on the same vein, but this has been going around a while, but it resurfaced again. And the title of the article is How to Identify a Homosexual According to the CIA. So in 1980, the CIA put out a memo to all their field offices when they were doing recruiting as to how to identify the homosexuals that came in, because they weren't allowed. Now when I interviewed for the CIA, I told you how uncomfortable it was. Where they really kind of interrogated me after the third round, and I backed out. But so this was the memo, and you can't make it up. But anyway, it says. They sent in 1980, the CIA released this memorandum to identify homosexuals during investigation for employment in order so that they wouldn't be hired because of fear of blackmail. So they said, so here are some ways to identify the homosexual according to the CIA. Number 1, no, it won't be easy. One of the most common mistakes is that you think you can recognize a homosexual on sight.
Did you laugh when you read this?
This is not like recognizing a communist, the memo explains.
Oh, they're easy, right?
It says, alas, homosexuals don't have special birthmarks nor tattoos, and very few employees will wear eye makeup to work. That was the first one.
Oh, my God. What year is this?
80.
Okay.
Do know he's a good worker. The homosexual is usually regarded as an above-average employee, the memo notes. His work habits are good. He's punctual, responsive to authority, cooperative, friendly, and a credit to the organization. So I guess if you get Employee of the Month, you're a homo.
Wow.
Number 3, he has a post office box. Wants to be clandestine.
Clandestine.
letters.
Okay. P.O. Box.
Number 4, I laughed at this one. He'll drive either an Audi or a Volkswagen.
That was before. Well,
his car is preferably foreign. It's often reserved just for the weekends. He rarely drives to the office. And but do know that gays love foreign cars. That's one giveaway. If the interviewee has a foreign car and you have questions, you could probably assume it's homosexual. Number 5, he speaks a foreign language or foreign gay language. So the homosexual has their own language, and includes language and passwords and auditory signals which they will use with each other to identify one another. They also have a code such as gay, straight, and bi. Like that's a code?
Yeah, it's hardly a code as a
they said that.
Right?
So it went ahead to define bi as interested in homosexual and heterosexual activities. So maybe they have a Saab and a Ford.
That's a good one. A very all-American brand and a foreign car.
He has a roommate. It's not uncommon for 2 homosexuals to live together and not engage in homosexual activity, but they will live together. He's also a great tenant. The landlords encourage rentals to homosexuals because they're neat, they're generally quiet, they're interested in keeping their apartments in good condition, they're dependable, and they usually end up getting their full security deposit back. The homosexual.
Oh my God! I cannot believe that someone was tasked with writing this.
Well, can you imagine? I'd love to talk to the person who wrote it.
Yeah.
And number 8, he's really smart. The homosexual is complex, intelligent, interesting, but a mixed-up individual. Number 9, the big caution is, but he will F stuff up in public, and they use expletives. Be sure to check their credit report and police records. They can go astray and sometimes disturb the peace or have other similar defenses and arrest for disorderly conduct should they get out of control. I guess they thought everybody was at the Stonewall riots.
Did you take? I took one notable thing away from this.
Sounds like a good hire, though.
Sounds like a great hire, yeah. But I took one notable thing. It's all male they were talking about.
Yeah. Well, the homosexual, because they were hiring
men.
For the CIA for the men.
Well, women could work for the CIA,
now,
right?
Yeah, but this was how to identify the homosexual 1980 CIA memo. So it's 80, 90, 100, 40 years ago.
Wow. If you don't think progress has occurred, and the 80s don't feel that too far. Maybe because we like the music from the 80s. Wow, Tim, that is. Did you see that as a article?
Yeah, it was. It's been in a few places. I don't know. It's bubbled up recently, but I saw it in 3 different places. I think it might have been the HuffPost, maybe Gay Star News. There's a few places it popped.
I'm glad when this stuff surfaces because it really does serve as a wonderful reminder of. In fact, I guess without knowing it, both caught our eyes, dealt with
things of
the community that have
community of times past. Yeah. So our business birthday this week.
Everyone does celebrity birthday greetings, but the Focus Group is the only show in the universe that celebrates business birthdays.
I mentioned to John it was difficult this week to find a business birthday, but I did find one. Warren Owen Briggs Sr., born February 27th, 1877. He died in 52 at 74. He was an American entrepreneur and a professional sports owner. They kind of glazed over his business. But he owned something called Briggs Manufacturing, which specialized in making automobile bodies. Mm-hmm. So they made the body frames for cars. It was ended up being bought by Chrysler.
Oh,
So
now, the minute you said Briggs, I thought of small engine
Briggs & Stratton.
manufacturing.
I thought so too until I read this. But he started this company. He'd actually worked for the Michigan Railroad for a while and did some engineering work, but then opened up Briggs Manufacturing, and he specialized in the manufacturing of automobile bodies for the auto industry, but later diversified also into plumbing fixtures. I don't know how you
go from one to the other,
body,
right?
how about a toilet?
Wait, what was that again?
Here's an auto body.
How about a toilet?
A toilet. He was also part owner of the Detroit Tigers, a Major League Baseball team from 1919 to 1935. He was the sole owner up until 1952 from 35. He also helped found the Detroit Zoo in 2008. He personally paid for many of the first exhibits. He also was a patron of Eastern Michigan University and the Detroit Symphony. He was a big Tigers fan, as I noted, although he really had a problem with African Americans. And they said, although he allowed African Americans, he was known as being a prejudiced man, which, as we end up Black History Month, we probably should not highlight him. But he's, I think you can't forget about your history here. So he had a reputation of being prejudiced against African Americans, in part because he refused to sign any black players for the team. So the Detroit Tigers are one of the last teams. Boston Red Sox was the final team to finally integrate.
Boston Red Sox was I'm surprised by that, actually.
Yeah, but the Detroit Tigers were second to last.
Integrate.
He also wouldn't allow black players to. He allowed them to work, of course, in his factory, but didn't allow them to sit in the boxes at the stadium either. To watch baseball.
And you bring up a great point as we near the end of Black History Month, and I think a lot of the networks did some really terrific things with people that we may have forgotten or you didn't know about, teachers, people in the public sphere that you never heard about that made a contribution. It's an interesting thing to bring this up because that was the norm.
Yep.
He wasn't an outlier. But the fact that the Red Sox didn't integrate till after the Detroit Tigers.
Yeah, I was surprised by that too. And when I read that, and I was like, well, I figured it was a team in the South or something, but no, it wasn't. It said the Tigers did not field their first non-white player until '58, 6 years after he died, making them the second to last team of the majors to integrate, ahead of only the Boston Red Sox.
Wow.
Yeah, I would have figured it'd be something else.
Well, again, he was another generation, right? There was at least two or three.
And this reminds me of just something quick, though, and all of these issues with, the Virginia mess with
which has died down a bit, which has died down. The blackface issue, yeah.
But there was somebody at Gettysburg College who was on the board of trustees who just resigned because his fraternity had a Stalag 13 from Hogan's Heroes party. So it was a Hogan's Heroes party.
But I can see where you're going with this. How do you separate
the Nazis
where that came from versus the TV show with Bob Crane and the hilarity of Colonel
Well, that's
Klink?
what it was. They were all different characters.
Yeah, exactly.
And so he was forced to resign because he was one of the Germans and he had a swastika. I'm wondering, so it made me want to go back and watch Hogan's Heroes to see was there any of that imagery in there.
Well, certainly Colonel Klink had it on his. I don't know if Schultz was but look at how well we know this. This is TV we grew up with in the afternoon, right?
But I thought it was, sometimes I think the slippery slope of this thing. Here's a kid, 1979, 1980, they have a Hogan's Heroes party where half the party was...
Well, Tim, you could actually just stop, you could stop the typewriter at Hogan's Heroes, right? So look at the difference in time periods we're in. Back when they developed that sitcom, they were drawing humor from a prisoner of war camp.
Yeah.
Now, that's not the same as a concentration camp, but it was a POW camp during World War II, and all that other stuff was going on. But nowadays, and yet that show ran for a couple seasons. It was very popular.
Yeah. So it actually made me think about that because I thought, well, here this guy once again, and because it was a TV show. But anyway,
I will tell you that if I ever run for office or anything like that, the only thing in my past is I have dressed up as Captain Kirk and I have dressed up as the Emperor from Star Wars.
I think you're okay.
I think you're okay. Thank you, Tim.
Hey, many of you know that our partner here on the focus group, Deep Discount, invites you to share in the savings. And so be sure to head over to focusgroupradio.com and click on the Deep Discount logo and start saving away.
Who's on the logo? Sharky.
Sharky the Shark.
Arr, shark.
Sharky the Shark is on the logo, and there's an award-winning film sale going on right now. And although there's only 2 days left, or there's really a day left.
Well,
so
today
if you're
and
watching
tomorrow.
live, right?
Yeah.
You can still get the discount if you check out at FG15 when you load up your shopping cart. But because we're at the end of the month. So what did you pick this? What did you pick this?
All right, so as Tim said, if it's Wednesday the 27th or Thursday the 28th and you're listening or watching and you go to Deep Discount, you do some shopping, the discount code for February is FG15. We only get to do this once or twice a year, which we love giving you the code. One-time use only, good for everything except games and game consoles, and cannot be used other codes or coupons. FG15. So, award-winning movies, free range of the site. I landed on a movie that I adore. It's Gosford Park. And Gosford Park came out in 2001. Maggie Smith, a Bob Altman mystery. He's the director. If you like Downton Abbey, if you like all that stuff, then Gosford Park is a movie for you. And at 1070, have you seen Gosford Park?
I did. I don't. I need to watch it again, though.
Okay. I suppose if you just say, I did, it didn't leave an indelible memory on
Remember
you.
I fell asleep at American Beauty, John?
You had an excuse.
I know, but it's, sometimes a movie goes on and that's my
Click.
code.
Time to sleep. So Gosford Park is a baffling murder at a British weekend retreat leaves everyone a suspect in this stylish Bob Altman mystery. I love it. I think it's super well done. And Bob and I watch this probably once a year.
Really?
Yeah, it's one of those things where he'll pop it in
Put it
now
on the
and then.
calendar. Oh, it's time for Gosford Park.
Well, sometimes Bob likes to do things with the TV on. So, like, I'll be in my office and I'll hear music or dialogue from, this movie, for instance. I'll immediately drift in and sit down. Then, lo and behold, an hour and a half later, I've watched the whole film, or 2 hours later. So
You're a movie household.
I love movies. So, what'd you pick?
So I picked something that, to me, you know that I've always been a fan of fried green tomatoes, and this to me is similar to that in that I can pick up and watch this movie at any point and just get sucked into it. And it came out in 2017, but it's Hidden Figures. And it's the incredible story of Katherine Johnson, Dorothy Vaughan, and Mary Jackson, which were 3 African-American women that worked at NASA. And a lot of it was their brains behind getting us to space.
They're the mathematicians, right?
Right. And when you watch it and you see particularly how the one woman was treated that was the pure mathematician in terms of having to use the other bathroom, there's a very touching moment, I think, when Costner, lets her use the right bathroom. But everything from whether she was allowed to use the same coffee pot, and
we're talking about the 60s.
Yeah, and so it's I think to me, it was a very feel-good movie, and particularly with John Glenn saying that he only trusted her numbers. And I mean, I think that was.
I remember when you saw this movie. It's really stuck with you,
right? And it's empowering, and I think it's also empowering to women. I think if I had little girls or my nieces, I would make every little girl watch this movie.
Hidden Figures. Well, when I saw it come up on your when the deck came in, and I saw you had picked it, because it is an award-winning film, I just smiled because there are certain movies that click for you, and this one definitely clicks for you.
Well, this one clicks because I think at the time, as you mentioned, it was the struggles that someone had in this country over race. But there's struggles with disability. There's struggles with mental illness. There's lots of struggles, and I think this is a good, to a certain extent, a metaphor for overcoming extreme odds and being successful
and triumphing and contributing to the national national triumph.
That was the other thing that and you've said this before. It's the one thing that I loved about the space program. Talk about the whole country being behind it. There's scenes where people are in front of department stores watching. I mean,
TVs
everybody's
and windows.
watching, right?
Yeah.
It was a big deal.
And they believed it.
Yeah,
they believed in it.
So what was the
So
new
the release this week is another historical drama I highly recommend. Wait a minute, I take that back. My mother recommends it.
Oh, well, then I won't watch it.
Carol wants you to see this movie.
Your mother recommended that one movie I didn't like.
Which
At
one?
that hotel.
Oh, the Grand Budapest Hotel.
Oh.
Well, guess what?
That's right up there with American Beauty and English Patient.
So you'll be happy to know that Lauren, out in California, who we work with at Deep Discount, she's not a big fan of Wes Anderson, who is, in fact, the director of the Grand Budapest Hotel.
Oh.
I love that movie, and I just love the stage.
I tried because your mother recommended it.
This is different. This is historical, and this is about.
All right, Carol, I'll give you another
This is a
shot.
movie about sisters who happen to be big rivals. It's called Mary Queen of Scots. It's just come out on Blu-ray. And an impressive historical opus offers a striking depiction of 16th century Scots regent Mary Stuart, who was in fact the first child born to Henry VIII by Catherine of Aragon, who was Catholic. By the way, I studied Tudor England in college. It was one of my specialties.
What did that get you?
A dime and a cup of coffee. They don't even drink coffee. And her tense rivalry with threatened first cousin Elizabeth I.
Is that Queen Elizabeth's mother?
So Elizabeth I is the daughter of Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn, and she reigned supreme, never married. She was widowed, never had a child. She reigned for, I think it was 45 years or something, a long time. But the movie's about their turbulent relationship and of ultimately the beheading of, which is it's not a spoiler, folks. Mary Queen of Scots had her head chopped off. I happened to look at some of the scenes from the movie. It looks fantastic. It looks. When we were growing up, they would shoot these old movies in a Hollywood style. The castles were beautiful. Right. The people had. This looks a little more gritty. And Elizabeth I used to be known for wearing like a white face. Right. Apparently, in this movie, they talk about the fact that she wore that white makeup because she had bad skin. And she was trying to conceal it with this white. It also gave her a very dramatic look. So the releases.
They're dirty people. It wasn't until after World War II where we got them refrigeration and running water.
Soap.
All
right. So
we get in trouble for that.
Recapping. It's February 27th, February 28th. You could use the code FG15, one-time use only. Everything except games and game consoles can't use other codes. We were looking at award-winning movies this week. Tim picked Hidden Figures, a really great movie. Good pick, Tim. I picked Gosford Park for 1070. Came from 2001. If you're a Downton Abbey fan or any of that period of time, you must see this movie. And the new release this week is Mary Queen of Scots on Blu-ray. Garrett, I know you've been waiting to say it.
Thanks, Deep Discount.
Full-throated, authentic, and real. We're going to take a super quick break, and when we come back, I would say that our shop talks are all about flying. There you go.
You're listening to The Focus Group with Tim and John. Learn more at focusgroupradio.com. Focus on the savvy side of 9 to 5 with The Focus Group.
Try, really try.
Listen, laugh, and learn with Tim and John.
I never try anything. I just do it.
Hey, welcome back to The Focus Group. Tim Bennett here. If you get a chance, hit like. Tell your friends to like and subscribe and everything else.
More importantly, subscribe. Start downloading the show and check out Unbuttoned.
Oh, well, yeah. So on Tuesdays, we have a podcast called TFG Unbuttoned, and John and I are able to do a little more off-the-cuff chatter, sometimes politics. We got to add a little more politics.
We can. I'm almost afraid to talk politics because the minute you talk about it, it's changed already.
That's true.
In our current world, a day goes by and everything's different.
So John and I, we talked about putting the show together, and we had 3 stories that involved flying or the airlines.
Actually, 2 accidentally involved, and then you found a third. And so Tim very cleverly said, let's make this a themed shop talk.
Themed shop talk. So it's all about flying.
Tim's a marketing guy. He does this really well.
We get paid for that sometimes. So the first one, the headline is after nearly 20 years, an abandoned JFK terminal reopens as an unbelievably cool hotel. So John's excited about this. So the TWA terminal at JFK, which was done in the 60s
1962.
by Eero Saarinen, is that how you say it?
Perfectly said, Eero Saarinen.
And which very cool mid-century modern furniture. You know the look, if you know what we're talking about. And so they've decided to take this abandoned terminal, which has been closed since about 2001.
Yeah, a long time.
And they made it into a hotel and added a couple wings. And they have 512 rooms, and they just started taking, earlier this month, they just started taking reservations for when they open in May.
May 15th is the actual.
May 15th, but they said you better hurry up because it's going crazy with people wanting to stay there. And so you were excited because you said, oh, you would go out for the weekend.
Oh, I would love it. So the TWA terminal at JFK, most people would recognize it. It's Saarinen designed it to resemble a bird, or the wings of it, like there's these big cantilevered concrete roofs. It was an iconic building. It just says to me, this reminds me of Don Draper, Mad Men, and there's a line that Don Draper used in Mad Men where he would say, "Air travel is civilized." Well, that's a bygone era, right? With people coming on in Crocs and sweatpants. Are those Crocs dead yet?
Well, there's still a Crocs store down in Rehoboth, but I think it's sellout. But they're gone pretty much. Yeah.
So I just thought that the reinvention of this as a hotel was a great idea. You're at the airport. It's kind of cool.
Well, they did say that. So there were two things. I guess you could, if you wanted to stay in a very fun kitsch, because they restored it back to its grandeur.
Rotary dial
phones and the furniture, period furniture, and
your favorite part, though.
And they said it's the quietest hotel in the country, probably other than a Four Seasons.
Yeah, it said when they got to do the building, to redo it, it was a mess. It was filled with asbestos, lead paint, and all the windows were non-tempered glass. But when they did the construction, which took 22 government agencies, 178 different consulting firms, and more than 7,000 people working pretty much around the clock for the last 4 years, one of the things they did do was put in some of the most soundproofing glass available. Yep. In fact, it has a higher STC rating, that's the sound rating, than the Four Seasons Hotel. It'll be the quietest room anywhere. So one of the favorite, Tim, when he read the article, he found one of his favorite parts of this, though. So the main building is going to be like the core of the hotel. They did add some wings on, which is where the new rooms are. It's soundproof. And then you found out about the cocktail lounge.
So the cocktail lounge has a plane in it. It's a decommissioned 1958 Lockheed Constellation airplane called Connie. That was the name of the model. And it broke the transcontinental speed record in '46, but then was soon retired. It was also, in the 50s, it served as President Eisenhower's Air Force One. But they said this particular plane that they have began as a passenger jet in '58. It was replaced by a newer model 2 years later. I have to read this because you can't believe it. It says, after a few more years, it became a TWA cargo plane, then an Alaskan bush pilot plane.
This is the same aircraft.
Right. Then it was sold off for $150 by the 1980s and outfitted with a cargo door in her side for airdropping pallets of weed. So it engaged itself with an illustrious career as a drug runner, playing all over Latin America.
Open the door, and then they push the weed out. Connie's coming.
He's coming. It gets stuck in a ditch in Honduras and abandoned. Another drug dealer picks it up. He buys it. He gets sent to jail for tax evasion. The plane ends up at auction and ends up now here at the JFK terminal, been totally restored, and it's cocktail lounge.
You know, I think all of this stuff is for our listener. Billy is going to get a kick out of this, right? Billy in upstate New York, because he loves planes. That last part, by the way, when you read that the plane was ultimately restored with the original parts.
Yep.
OMG!
Yeah,
what an amazing thing, right?
One of only 4 remaining models in existence.
So you could have cocktails in the plane. So I say, if you're in the area, why not go out for a night?
Go out for a night, or if
bring an overnight bag.
If you have to stay over, I guess there's worse. You know, it's better than staying up.
And by the way, the JFK is so easy to get to with the air train. You take the monorail, hop on the train to Penn State. I want to take Bob. I want to do it on a weeknight.
Well, maybe we'll all go.
So the weekends are probably crazy, but I bet if you go
Tuesday night.
Exactly. So
the second story. Headline: several major airlines are going to offer a non-binary option on tickets. So several major airlines are going to offer non-binary options on tickets, with several airlines have announced they're going to start doing this immediately for their tickets for passengers starting mid-February. So they've already started. American, Delta, United, Southwest, Alaska, and JetBlue are doing it, and you can find out information on their websites. They said, an American Airlines spokesperson, Matt Miller, said, "We have a diverse customer base. This has been well received, and we want our passengers to feel comfortable and welcome no matter what their self-identity is." And I was confused by this because I thought, so there's male, female, and then there's going to be either an X or I don't know.
Well, we've seen it come up in research, unspecified,
Right.
Or what's the line you found in some research recently where people just don't feel like answering that question?
Yeah, well, yeah.
That was also about ethnicity, though, right?
Yeah, that was about ethnicity. But they said that it's what my confusion with this was, if you check non-binary and however that's going to be identified, what about your federal documents? So your passport.
There's going to be a
driver's
mismatch.
license.
So if the driver,
so for security at an airport, isn't that an issue?
Yeah, I think it could be, but this just seems to be for boarding passes.
Well, they said there's only 2 states that have approved non-binary IDs, Oregon and Washington. And a number of other states are looking at it. I believe California. But
given that you just said that, it strikes me that this is just something to ease travel tension, because we're talking about a ticket or a boarding pass, right?
Yeah, it says on June 1st, a new standard approved by the U.S. and international airline trade groups will go into effect regarding non-binary passengers. The standard allows airlines to comply with requirements that passenger information must match what is on their form of ID used for travel. And some people will list undisclosed or unspecified. They may also opt for the title MX.
I like the MX one, by the way. When I read that, I was like, "Oh, okay, MX."
So that was my only confusion, though, because if you went through security and
I think the security issues are they usually just want to match name and ID to ticket, but I wonder. I'm not sure gender plays a huge role in that.
Well, anyway, I thought once again business is moving quicker than
the government.
Quicker than government. What was our third story?
Last one is a story that I found because it starts like this. I'm having lunch with my friend Ed. I love Ed. Hello, Ed. And I said to him, I have some recommendations for some films and TV shows. And I tell him about what I wanted to recommend. And he looks at me, he goes, "Where'd you see them?" And I said, "I saw them on the plane coming back from London after Bob's birthday." "Oh, okay. Well, yeah, I'll put them on the list." And I detected a hesitancy in putting them on the list. And I said, "What's this kind of wishy-washy stuff?" "Oh, well, I don't really trust things. I don't trust recommendations from people when they see something on a plane, because you know how it is." He goes, you kind of cry on planes. And it hit me like a ton of bricks, and I realized, oh my God, the last 5 or 6 times I've flown, I've been very emotionally invested in what I'm watching on the monitor, to the point where if I saw the same movie not flying, I'm like, why did I shed a tear?
Star Wars? Were you crying?
Well, take one, Finding Mr. Banks, the movie about how Mary Poppins got made with Tom Hanks and Emma Thompson. By the end of the movie, I was like, oh my God.
Were you crying on the plane?
I shed a tear. I'm like, they're going to make Mary Poppins.
Shed a tear, or were you crying?
I shed a tear.
Oh, your nose. Ah!
No, not crazy like that, but I did shut it down quickly. But I watched Pose, the FX show, on the way back from London. 4 episodes in, I had to shut it down. I was getting so wrapped up in it. I was getting my eyes.
Well, you do need a drool cup when you watch the moving screen. I've seen you. I've never seen anybody. You're like a fly to a light.
The moving
like
image.
A moth to a flame.
So guess what, folks? I Googled this, because you can Google it or Bing it or DuckDuckGo, whatever the search engine you're using is.
DuckDuckGo?
That's another one. You should try it out. It doesn't track you and doesn't do all these interesting things.
I never heard of that.
Guys, you heard of DuckDuckGo, right?
Yeah, it's like the Google that doesn't track you.
See,
All right,
Garrett?
there you
Google tracking me?
Yeah.
I want stuff to track me.
I
Make
feel like
my life
everything
better.
does.
It makes everything better. Why do I want ads that I don't want? Show me
Exactly.
ads of stuff I want.
Garrett,
Yeah.
Garrett, once again, Big Brother can be helpful. Sometimes Big Brother's helpful, I agree. And I don't mind being tracked for that stuff, for searches and stuff. So I Google it, and what comes up, but a lot of research has been done on why people get very emotional on planes. And it broke into 3 categories: psychological, physical, and I think the last one was alcohol. So psychological is we bring ourselves with us, including all our thoughts, and it's air travel, whether you like it or not, is stressful. You're in a small space that's usually less than your comfort zone, right? Think about sitting there. A lot of stuff's out of your control. So that's the psychological. The physical, as I just said, was the spaces are smaller. Your knees are in the chair in front of you.
Find your anxiety.
And here's a paragraph. It's not comforting to fly anymore. Our basic needs, food and drink, blankets and pillows aren't provided for. Well, they do provide something.
Cabin pressure is an issue.
That's the one that was the big one. So it says, I didn't realize this, but most airlines maintain the cabin pressure to be as if you are at 5,000 or 8,000 feet. 2,000 feet more, you're up at the top of a mountain in Telluride. And you know and I know that I'm not my best self at altitude until I've been there for a few days.
Well, I always wondered why at takeoff I get tired. You ever notice that? It's probably because as you're going up, less oxygen.
You know, I never thought of that. You're right. As the takeoff happens.
Everybody's quiet. The planes, everybody's always quiet at takeoff.
I'm just wondering, like, are we going to hit altitude? And everybody listening who flies, the most dangerous part of any flight is not the takeoff. You know what it is, right?
No.
Landing. Landing. I sat next to a pilot one time. He answered 3 questions.
Landing's most difficult?
I was allowed to ask 2 to 3 questions when I found out he was a pilot, and he could tell I was going to be a problem.
Well, you were a problem.
And I said, is the air in the cabin recirculated? He goes, constantly. It's constantly being recirculated. He said it's a misnomer that the air is stuck and it's full of germs. I said, what's the most dangerous part of flying? And he looks out the window and he says, for all the fact that we're in the air, flying is a ground-based activity. Airports, refueling, landings, you have to have the ground. He said, but the most dangerous part of any flight is, in fact, the landing.
Huh, I didn't realize that. Well, unless you have wind shear.
And I think he kind of fell asleep for the 3rd question. So, and the last thing of why you get tired or why you get very emotional on planes could be that we often have a glass of wine or a cocktail, and that also contributes to your dehydration, which hooks into the physicality of being at the 5,000 or 8,000 feet pressurization, and the dehydration adds that.
I think it's funny that Ed had made that comment about you were
Ed flies
emotional.
A lot. Yeah.
But I used to fly a lot more than I do, but I don't ever remember me crying, nor do I remember anybody around me crying on the plane.
Well, I'll end this whole thing.
Were you crying?
No, not crying, but I get very
emotional.
I get invested in it, like, oh my God. And then when I see these things later, I'm like, why did I?
Wow. Well, you had another problem.
All right, we'll wrap it up by saying a couple doctors disagree with all of this and say, you know what, crying is crying. Anyway,
so there
doesn't matter if you're at altitude or not.
That, Ed.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. We want to thank Deep Discount for being a partner of ours here on the Focus Group. Go to Deep Discount by getting there, and you get there by going to focusgroupradio.com, clicking on Sharky the Shark, and start your shopping. And the new release this month is Mary Queen of Scots. And Tim picked Hidden Figures because it's award-winning month, and I picked Gosford Park, which I highly recommend. So we will see you next week, and we close by saying, don't text and drive, arrive alive.
It's The Focus Group with Tim Bennett and John Nash. Accessible on all platforms. Subscribe, like, and rate us on your platform of choice. Learn more at focusgroupradio.com.
That was a stunning focus group.